Thanks, men of song, all returning to your places. It's such a great joy to be with all of you this morning. I bring you greetings from Emmanuel Baptist Church, where I serve, and they'll be starting worship shortly, around 10 a.m. this morning, so I'm thinking of them too on the first week of Advent. I see lots of friends here, and I keep being surprised. I've been traveling through the masses over the weekend, starting last night and this morning. And I see different beloved people out there, people like Steve I work with in the community, and friends from all kinds of places, and especially Tuesday Mass, which is my people. I know you're scattered all about here. I have to say I didn't see many of you at 7:30. I think they're like me. 7:30 was not quite my hour either. I've also noticed that each Mass has its own character, which has been a lot of fun to sense that. So I'm still figuring you all out. Today's sermon, I'm a Baptist, so I know it's supposed to be a homily, but it's kind of a sermon to me. Today's sermon is titled Tender Signs. This is kind of a strange passage, isn't it, to start off Advent with, the first week of Advent. We get this passage that's in the biblical genre of the apocalyptic. And maybe not everybody knows what apocalyptic literature is all about, but I'll tell you a quick thing about it, which is we picture sort of end times, right? The nature really of apocalyptic literature comes from the experience of extreme oppression. So you're so utterly crushed down, and the forces that are pressing upon you are so complete that the only thing you can imagine is a radical shift. And this literature all through the Bible comes out of that kind of experience, imagining the impossible transformation of power that only God can bring. It conjures up what part of it is also, I think, a really important reminder about what's important and what's not important, what to cling to and what not to cling to. So there are a lot of things in our lives that crumble, right? So death occurs, things fall apart. We see that whole economies can collapse, empires can fall. And this kind of literature brings us into that reality as well. We've been preaching these texts. I mentioned that Jim preached this, not a stone will be, when Jesus is looking at the temple and says, not a stone will be left on stone, right? And Jim said on Tuesday that, everything comes to an end. Spiritus Christi will come to an end. He said that Emmanuel Baptist will come to an end. But I told him this morning, I said, at the moment he said that on Tuesday, I thought, what? After all this work? But it's true. I mean, this is a dimension of our lives, that things come to an end. For me, when I first looked at the passage, I start thinking about our preoccupations with end times, and I was thinking of the previews of the movie 2012. Have any of you maybe even seen the movie? I've only seen the previews. And this genre is out there everywhere. All these movies where we are watching skyscrapers tumble and bridges be torn apart and roads lifting up and things falling from the heavens. We have a kind of preoccupation with this image of collapse. And these texts sometimes feed that preoccupation, I think a little mistakenly. But we have all these great special effects in Hollywood, so we can kind of get our adrenaline going and our fear going and put ourselves in these horrific scenes, right? But I really wonder, is this what Jesus is talking about? Is this what Jesus wants us to walk away from this passage with, from this teaching? A lot of people believe that the teaching is that Jesus will come a second time and physically descend from the clouds in a given space and time, in some future point that we haven't yet attained. And yet there's this mysterious thing that occurs in the passage that says, it says, this experience will come upon all of us who live on the face of the earth. And I kept returning to that when Jesus says, this will come upon all who live on the face of the earth, all the people in all the ages, all the people in all the places. So I want to propose to you this morning that we're not looking in this passage at a future cataclysmic event with some superhuman Son of Man coming down physically through the clouds. But we're called to look around at the real circumstances of our lives. We are people living on the face of the earth, experiencing this experience. We're to look at this passage, look at this experience, and search for the signs of our Redeemer. When collapses occur, when death occurs, when economies collapse, when empires fall, we are to know that God is near, that our Redeemer draws closer to us, and we're to seek the signs. In this text, we hear the mysterious term, the Son of Man, which has such ominous qualities. I think for many of us, it's just this mysterious term. What are we talking about? This supernatural, divine figure. And I think part of this is simple translation. We could also, sometimes I read the text as the child of humanity, or the human one. The reason being that in the term, I believe the biblical writers are trying to get us to see the weakness and humility of our God. When we turn and go for this supernatural, overpowering figure, we miss the lesson. We don't see that God comes to us through weakness, that God comes to us through tenderness and vulnerability. When the child of humanity comes in all God's glory, we stand in this radiant, holy place in the presence of the living Christ, where tenderness and holiness meet. Holy, radiant tenderness, compassion flowing. When the child of humanity comes, we see this mysterious, eternal strength, that which won't ever pass away, that lies in the most tender of moments. The weak is what saves us. Can you see the signs? Imagining these big cataclysmic events, these images we see in movies like 2012 are precisely the trap. It's noticing the unnoticed signs, the small signs, where we'll find our Redeemer drawing close. This truth that doesn't pass away, is our escape from the trap. Jesus said, "Look at the fig tree and all the trees. As soon as they sprout leaves, you can see for yourselves and know that summer is already near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know the kingdom of God is near. So stay awake, watch. Our Maker is drawing near. Notice the little buds from the branches, the promise that summer lies in the middle of winter. Stay close to these tender signs." Leonard Beachy writes that in Advent, we are in the time between the times, when the veil between worlds grows thin and the holy calls to us from the world to come. Here we are entering Advent. Are you feeling the holy calling to you? Do you see the veil growing thin? I've had several different experiences in my life of the veil growing thin, and actually Hava may recall some of this too. In September 11th, 2001, I was in my first semester in seminary, and in fact in my first class, which was Old Testament. And in the morning when the news came in, and the whole seminary was bustling and everyone was feeling terrified, and we were wandering into the halls and seeing the TV screens blaring and really trying to grapple with the kind of collapse we had experienced that day, even trying to fathom it. And we went off into chapel that morning, and I knelt on the pew, basically on the ground. We don't have good kneelers in our seminary chapel. And just put my head on a pew and felt tears come. And the fascinating thing that occurred in that moment for me was the depth of God's presence, this radiant holiness that in this collapse, God's presence was just pouring over us. The veil was so thin. Perhaps you felt the Redeemer draw close to you, when tears roll down, experiencing the love of another, or sometimes that when an old broken belief just falls away and you're free from it, or when you've stood up and spoken the truth, trembling. A friend described another example that comes to my mind about these tender signs. She was riding on a bus in Pasadena this summer where we had our Baptist biennial, and it was a crowded bus and, busyness of buses and people getting on and off, and she saw this old woman sitting on the bench, and the woman's clothes were dirty and torn, and she felt this woman looked so vacant in a way, just kind of numb and blank and sad. And this young woman who has a daughter, and her daughter about 3, climbed onto this bus, and as is often the case with young moms, trying to juggle a million things and the busyness of the bus and trying to get organized, different people around helping and getting them seats. And in the midst of this, she was just watching this little girl, and she saw her go sit next to this old woman and then reach out her hand to take this woman's hand. And she saw the woman kind of look like almost to resist, and then saw the woman accept this little girl's hand. And the two of them sit on this bus quietly and hold hands in the midst of all this chaos. And she felt at that moment, I was the only one who saw that. Even her own mom hadn't seen it. That's the holy presence, a tender sign. Life continues on. Maybe only one person saw it. But God is in these signs. Are we keeping watch? Heaven and earth will pass away, but this truth will not pass away. We can't make grace happen. We can't force Christ to come into our lives. We can't, clergy can't do it. We can't do any magic formulas and make that occur for you. We can't say any magic words that make that happen. These holy moments that Christ enters our space are a gift, pure grace. But what we can do during Advent is prepare ourselves. We can refuse to be distracted by the things that are collapsing. We can refuse to use our numbing techniques. Do you have numbing techniques? In the passage it says, don't be distracted by dissipation and drunkenness. In our Christmas season, Jesus might have thought to add consumerism, all of our numbing techniques. We can tune our senses to these tender signs. The signs of buds on branches, open hearts pouring out all over the world on September 12th. Do you remember that? The sign of tears flowing when we truly experience the reality of another. The sign of a small girl taking the hand of a tired old woman on the bus. The sign of a baby born to a poor family in the middle of the night in an animal stall, far, far away from all the important events of that day. Or was that the real event? Let us keep watch and find out.